World War II was a struggle that engulfed practically every country on the planet, and it came to an end on May 8, 1945. In many ways, the war was a continuation of the conflicts left unresolved by the World War I, following a tense 20-year break. Hi guys, welcome back to yet another video, and today we'll be looking at how World War II concluded and some unknown facts about it. Number 10. The Battle of Okinawa was World War II's last major battle. In World War II, the Battle of Okinawa was the final major battle. Operations Iceberg, a complicated plot to invade and occupy the Ryukyu Island, included the invasions. While the officials and the Second World War is widely acknowledged as September 2, 1945, fighting continued in many parts of the world long after that date. On April 1, 1945, almost 60,000 American soldiers and Marines arrived on the island of Okinawa. The lush greeny hills and trees of Okinawa made it the ideal setting for the Japanese High Command's final stand to defend their homeland. They knew that if Okinawa fell, Japan would fall with it. Securing Okinawa's airbase was vital to launching a successful Japanese invasion, according to the Americans. The island south of Kyushu served as a natural entry point for invasions of Japan, and American troops were ready to battle. Following that, 81 days of very vicious air, sea, and land battle, hindered by a deep forest and volcanic cracks, began. Although the Allied triumphed, 12,000 Americans were slaughtered in the process. Around 90,000 Japanese troops died in the conflict, along with 100,000 civilians. Number 9. The US strategic decisions to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki instead of other Japanese cities to end World War II. On July 16, 1945, an atomic bomb was successfully tested in a New Mexico desert. Truman and his advisors hoped that by using nuclear bomb on Japan, they could force an unconditional surrender and avoid the need of full-scale US invasions of the Japanese mainland. It was thought that the cities had suffered little damage from previous bombings would be the best targets for greatest impact. Kyoto was removed from the list due to its cultural significance as Japan's former capital. Other cities with substantial military headquarters and industrial centers were chosen by the target committee. In the Japanese defensive effort, Hiroshima served as a significant base of operations. Nagasaki was a major seaport for the country. Both cities were very important manufacturing centers during World War II. Number 8. The secret missions of the USS Indianapolis ended up worst naval disasters of World War II. The USS Indianapolis brought component of the 9,700 pounds nuclear fission bomb named Little Boy, which was to be dropped over Hiroshima in secret to an American airbase in the Northern Mariana Islands. The Indianapolis was attacked by a Japanese submarine and sank shortly after midnight on July 30th, 1945, after dropping off the goods. Approximately 300 crew members perished along with the ship. Remaining 900 men sat on the water surface, hoping to be rescued. Only 317 people remained alive when rescue arrived on August 2nd. The wreckage of the Indianapolis was discovered on the bottom of the Philippine Sea, 3.4 miles below the surface. On August 19, 2017, by a research team led by a Microsoft co-founder, Paul Allen. The sinking of the ship and the subsequent attack by sharks on the survivors inspired a famous scene from the film's Jaw, in which Captain Quinn recounts the event. Number 7. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims list is still unknown. The Little Boy bomb exploded over Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The yield of the explosions was 15,000 tons of TNT. The city, which was flat and ringed by hills, was an excellent target for the atomic bomb in many ways, at least for the standpoint of its creators. Their purpose was to show Japanese, the Soviet, and the rest of the world the potentials of this new arsenal through destructions and spectacle. Takakura, a 20-year-old eyewitness at that time. Dark smoke rose approximately 4,000 feet in a matter of minutes. Over 90% of the city's structures were either damaged or destroyed. Fat Man, an implosion-type plutonium bomb, was dropped on Nagasaki 3 days later. The blast impacts, which were equivalent to 21,000 tons of TNT, were felt throughout a 43 square mile area. Census records are inconclusive, and the obliterations of government facilities and other reasons make exact data is impossible to obtain. 70,000 people were killed in Hiroshima and 40,000 in Nagasaki in the initial bomb, not adding those who died later from radiation illness and other injuries. The disparities between the Hiroshima and Nagasaki outcomes were attributable to variances in population sizes and topography. Nagasaki, on the other hand, was a less desirable target. Number 6. In 1946, the last Japanese internment camp closed after World War II. Before Pearl Harbor, the Pacific Northwest has a sizable and successful Japanese and Japanese-American community. President Franklin D. Roosevelt established Japanese internment camps during World War II under an executive order. Beginning in 1942, around 120,000 citizens of Japanese descent were interned in internment camps spread across 7 states in the United States. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the detentions of Japanese Americans regardless of citizenships or loyalty to offer every conceivable safeguard against spying and destructions. The last of these camps remained operating until March 20, 1946, in Northern California. Number 5. War on Japan was declared less than a month before World War II ended. Japan's downfall was an inevitable conclusion by the summer of 1945. The Navy and the Air Force of Japan were defeated. The country and its economy had been destroyed by the Allied naval blockade of Japan and the intense bombing of Japanese towns. The Soviet Union agreed to wage war on Japan 3 months after Germany surrendered at the Allies' Tehran Conference in November 1943, in order to bring World War III to a close while retaking occupied territory from Japan. On August 8, 1945, that day arrived and around 1.6 million Soviet forces were quickly dispatched to Manchuria, which was occupied by the Japanese. During their clashes with Japanese forces in China, Korea, and Kuril Islands, the USSR suffered tremendous losses. Number 4. VE Day Victory in Europe Day fell on Truman's 61st birthday before VJ Day. Victory in Europe Day was the first, which marks the conclusions of the fight with Hitler's Germany. 3 months later, on VJ, or Victory in Japan Day, the Pacific War with Japan came to an end. Truman was sworn into office on April 12, 1945, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away. He got to convey some thrilling news early in his presidency. On May 8th, President Truman's birthday, the Allies formally recognized Germany's unconditional surrender. Despite the fact that the carnage in Europe had ended, things were heating up in the Pacific theater. Number 3. Few Japanese soldiers continued to fight even after the war ended. When 2nd Lieutenant Hiro Onoda was dispatched to Lubang Island in Philippines in December 1944, he was only 23-year-old. Years after the war ended, he and 3 enlisted soldiers would remain there. Soldiers classed with islanders they mistook for enemy's troops, disbelieving tales of Japan's loss. One of Onoda's companions surrendered in 1950, while the other 2 were shot by police officers in 1972. Lieutenant Onoda persisted until 1974, when he was rediscovered by a Japanese traveler. Later that day, a delegation led by one of Onoda's former superior officers arrived in Lubang to receive his surrender. Shoichi Yokoi and Teruo Nakamura, 2 other holdouts, were hidden in the former Pacific theaters until 1972 and 1974, respectively. Number 2. Soldiers in the Pacific theater couldn't return home for months. When the Axis power surrendered, the United States couldn't immediately return all of its soldiers. As a result, there was a lot of angst in other parts of the world. On September 17, 1945, Rep. Claire Booth Luce, a member of United States House Representatives from Connecticut, remarked that every congressperson was under constant and tremendous pressure from the servicemen and their families, who demanded quick releases. Service members deployed in Japan and the Far East began putting the slogan, "No boats, no votes," on their homebound letters, implying that if they weren't picked up quickly, politicians would learn about it during the next year's congressional elections. On Christmas Day, 4,000 homesick troops staged a major protest in Manila. Demonstrations of this nature were also held in Paris, London, and Frankfurt. Number 1. Japan officially surrendered aboard the USS Missouri, thereby bringing World War II to an end. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender terms to the Allies on August 14, 1945. The news spread quickly around the globe, sparking exuberant festivities, parades, and patriotic displays to commemorate VJ Days. Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru and General Yoshijiro signed the official instruments of surrender paper drafted by the U.S. War Department on September 2 aboard the USS Missouri. Before being decommissioned for the final time on March 31, 1992, the USS Missouri served in both Korean and Persian Gulf Wars, and the Axis countries unconditionally surrendered to the Allies in 1945, bringing World War II to an end. The Allies acknowledged Germany's surrender on May 8, 1945. And it's time to end our video right here. If you guys enjoyed it, then you know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back with more videos. Until then, stay tuned.